My name is Jody, a 32-year-old lawyer with a life that, from the outside, seems like a fairy tale. I come from a family that's pretty well off, and I've known Ethan, the guy I'm supposed to marry, since we were kids. Our dads are old buddies who used to joke about us tying the knot one day. I remember one summer evening, during one of our family's joint dinners, our fathers brought up the topic again. I was about 10, and Ethan was 13. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, laughed heartily and said, "Mark my words, Ethan, one day you'll marry Jody here, and our companies will be stronger for it." My dad joined in, chuckling, "Absolutely, John. These two will unite our legacies." I remember blushing furiously. Ethan just rolled his eyes and mumbled, as if I'd ever marry a kid. Back then, I was head over heels for Ethan. But he always saw me as the annoying little girl who followed him around. Despite his attitude, I couldn't help but nurture a small hope that one day, he'd see me differently. Years passed, and we both pursued our own paths. I dived into law, and Ethan became a hotshot financier in his father's company. Our paths rarely crossed, but I always kept tabs on him, my childhood crush never really fading away. During college, our families met less frequently, but the marriage joke continued. At a Thanksgiving dinner when I was 22, Mr. Thompson nudged Ethan and said, "So, Ethan, when are you going to make an honest woman out of Jody?" Ethan, who had had a bit too much to drink, replied loudly, "Fine. If Jody isn't married by 32, and I'm still single, I'll marry her. Happy now?" Everyone laughed, but I felt a strange mix of hope and embarrassment. The thought that Ethan might one day be my husband lingered in my mind like a stubborn perfume. I dated a bit after that, but nothing serious. Part of me always compared every guy to Ethan, and they all fell short. As for Ethan, he was seen with various women over the years, never settling down. I remember the day Ethan proposed like it was yesterday. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just returned from a long day at the law firm. I was exhausted, my mind still buzzing with the day's cases, when I found Ethan waiting for me at my apartment. "Hey, Jody." He greeted me casually, as if it was normal for him to be there. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged. "Thought I'd drop by. We need to talk." My heart raced. "We need to talk," those words never meant anything good in my experience. "Sure, let's talk. Is everything all right?" I tried to sound calm, but my voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Ethan took a deep breath. "Look, you know the promise I made years ago? About marrying you if we're both still single at 32. "Yeah," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. I wasn't sure where this was going. "Well, I'm a man of my word. So, here." He pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet elegant ring. "Will you marry me, Jody?" I was stunned. This wasn't the proposal I had dreamed of, but it was Ethan, and that was all that mattered. "Yes, Ethan, I will," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He slid the ring onto my finger, and that was it. No hug, no kiss, just a nod from him. "We should tell our parents. They'll be thrilled," he said, already reaching for his phone. I nodded, still processing what had just happened. This was it. I was going to marry Ethan. The next few days were a whirlwind. Our families met for dinner to celebrate the engagement. "Ethan, I can't tell you how happy this makes me," Mr. Thompson said, clapping Ethan on the back. "Yeah, it's great," Ethan replied, his tone flat. My dad raised his glass. "To Jody and Ethan, may this union bring happiness and prosperity to both our families." "To Jody and Ethan," everyone echoed. The dinner was filled with laughter and plans for the future. Everyone was excited, talking about the wedding and how perfect it was for the two families to unite at last. But as I sat there, listening to them, I couldn't help but feel like a bystander in my own life. This was everything I had ever wanted, so why did it feel so hollow? But then, another part of me argued that this was Ethan, the man I had loved all my life. Maybe, with time, he would come to love me. Give it a chance, Jody, I whispered to myself. Maybe this is the start of something wonderful. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself that everything would be all right. That this marriage, this union of two families, would somehow turn into the love story I had always dreamed of. The civil ceremony was a quiet affair, just our immediate families and a few close friends. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, got teary-eyed as we exchanged vows. Never thought I'd see the day, he said, wiping his eyes. My parents were beaming, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel a bit of happiness. After the civil ceremony, the real challenge began, planning the grand wedding. We decided on a 2-month timeline, which meant I had my work cut out for me. I dove into the preparations headfirst, hoping it would distract me from my doubts. One evening, I was sitting with a mountain of bridal magazines, trying to pick a theme for the wedding. Ethan walked in, late from work as usual. "Hey," I said, looking up. "What do you think about a vintage theme for the wedding?" Ethan glanced at the magazines and then at me. "Whatever you want, Jody. It's your day." I felt a twinge of disappointment at his indifference. "But it's our day," I protested softly. He sighed. "I'm beat, Jody. Just pick whatever you like. I'm sure it'll be great." He then walked away, leaving me alone with my magazines. I shook off the feeling of rejection and continued with the plans. Dress shopping was next on my list. I invited my mom and Ethan's mom, Mrs. Thompson, to join me. At the bridal shop, I tried on dress after dress, but nothing felt right. My mom was getting impatient. "Jody, they all look beautiful. Just pick one." Mrs. Thompson was more understanding. "Take your time, dear. It's a big decision." Finally, I found the perfect dress. It was elegant and simple, just what I had always imagined. "This is the one," I said, looking at myself in the mirror. Both moms agreed, and we celebrated with a small lunch. Mrs. Thompson brought up the topic of Ethan. "He's always been a bit reserved. Don't take it to heart, dear." I nodded, but her words didn't provide much comfort. The weeks flew by, and the wedding day was fast approaching. I was in the midst of choosing cakes and finalizing the guest list when I realized I hadn't seen much of Ethan. He was always at work or too tired to discuss anything when he was home. As the wedding day neared, I felt more like a wedding planner than a bride. My excitement was replaced by a sense of loneliness and a growing realization that maybe this marriage was more about convenience than love. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to focus on the wedding. Maybe, after the wedding, things would change. Maybe Ethan would be different. The day my world came crashing down started like any other. I was at work, buried under a mountain of case files, when a sudden wave of nausea hit me. I hadn't been feeling well all morning, so I decided to head home early. I pulled up to our house, noticing Ethan's car in the driveway. That was odd, he was never home this early. Quietly, I unlocked the front door, not wanting to startle him. Maybe he was sick too, I thought. As I stepped inside, I heard Ethan's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tiptoed closer. "No, baby, I can't wait to see you tonight," Ethan said, his voice soft and affectionate. My heart skipped a beat. Who was he talking to? I pressed myself against the wall, listening intently. "Yeah, marrying Jody is a pain, but it's worth it. Once I get control of the companies, we'll be set. Don't worry, after she pops out a kid, I'll dump her," he continued. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. The room spun around me as I struggled to process his words. "Yeah, she's clueless. Thinks I actually love her," he chuckled. That chuckle, so cold and cruel, shattered the last bit of hope I had. I couldn't listen anymore. I stumbled back to the front door, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there, to breathe. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I heard Ethan call out, Jody? Is that you?" I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to be away from that house, away from Ethan. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench, watching families and couples around me, oblivious to my world falling apart. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see what Ethan really was? I had to make a decision. Confronting Ethan was the obvious choice, but what then? Cause a scene, break off the engagement, and be the talk of our families and friends? Or play along, keep my dignity, and figure out what to do next? As the sun set, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Ethan see how much he had hurt me. I would play his game, for now, but on my terms. I had to be smart about this. I drove home, my face a mask of calm. Ethan was waiting for me, a concerned look on his face. "Where were you?" "I was worried," he said, coming towards me. "I wasn't feeling well, just needed some fresh air," I lied smoothly. He nodded. "Okay, well, I'm here now. Let's have dinner." I forced a smile. "Sure, that sounds great." As we sat eating, I looked at Ethan, really looked at him. This was the man I had loved my whole life, and now, he was nothing but a stranger to me. That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. One thing was clear, I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Ethan had no idea who he was dealing with. Lying next to Ethan that night, I couldn't shake off the mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I needed to know more, to understand the extent of his deceit. Quietly, I reached for his phone on the nightstand. My hands were trembling as I unlocked it, thank goodness for easy-to-guess passwords. I opened his messages and there it was, a string of texts with someone named Julia. My heart raced as I scrolled through their conversations. They were planning to meet the night before our wedding, in our house. An extreme date, in the presence of a sleeping wife, is exactly what they called their plan. So that I wouldn't disturb them, they planned to give me strong sleeping pills. The audacity of it made my blood boil. "Ethan, you bastard," I muttered under my breath. I heard him stir and quickly place the phone back, pretending to be asleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge. I couldn't let them get away with this. I needed a plan, something to turn the tables on Ethan and his mistress. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Ethan was his usual self, indifferent and preoccupied with work. I kissed him goodbye and watched him leave for the office. Once he was gone, I sat down with a cup of coffee, thinking about my next move. I decided to reach out to an old friend from law school, Mike. He was now a private investigator and could be the key to gathering the evidence I needed against Ethan. I met Mike at a small cafe downtown. He looked concerned when I told him about Ethan's betrayal. "Jody, I'm so sorry. What do you need me to do?" he asked. "I need evidence, Mike. Photos, texts, anything that can prove what he's up to," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mike nodded. "Consider it done. I'll get you everything you need." "Thank you, Mike. I can't let him get away with this," I replied, feeling a sense of empowerment for the first time since I heard Ethan's conversation. That evening, Ethan came home late again. We sat down for dinner, the tension between us palpable. "Is everything okay, Jody? You seem distant," Ethan said, his eyes not meeting mine. I forced a smile, just tired from wedding planning. "You know how it is." He nodded. "Yeah, I guess. Listen, I'll be working late tomorrow night. Don't wait up for me." I felt a flash of anger but kept my composure. "Sure, no problem. Work comes first, right?" He didn't detect the sarcasm in my voice. "Exactly. Glad you understand." As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but think about how blind I had been. Ethan never loved me. It was all a lie, a means to an end for him. But I wasn't going to be a pawn in his game any longer. I had Mike gathering evidence, and soon I'd have enough to expose Ethan for the fraud he was. But that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the humiliation and betrayal I felt. I started planning the ultimate revenge in my mind, a way to turn the tables and leave Ethan with nothing. He thought he was playing me, but he had no idea what was coming for him. The eve of our wedding arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. Ethan seemed more on edge than usual, but I pretended not to notice. I was too focused on my plan, the final act of this tragic play. Ethan came home early, which was unusual. He was carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Thought we could celebrate our last night as an unmarried couple," he said with a forced smile. I played along, hiding my contempt. "That sounds lovely," I replied, mustering a smile. As he poured the champagne, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment he'd try to drug me, as per his plan with Julia. We clinked glasses, and I brought the champagne to my lips, pretending to sip while actually letting it run down the side of my mouth. Ethan didn't notice, he was too busy texting under the table. Probably Julia, I thought bitterly. After a few minutes, I feigned dizziness. "Ethan, I'm not feeling so well. I think I need to lie down." He looked up, satisfaction flashing in his eyes for a moment. "Oh, okay. Do you need any help?" "No, I'll be fine. Just need some rest," I said, standing up shakily. As I made my way to the bedroom, I heard Ethan make a phone call. "She's out. You can come over now," he whispered. My heart raced. This was it. My plan was about to unfold. Once in the bedroom, I quietly locked the door and slipped under the covers, pretending to be asleep. I heard the front door open and close a while later, and then low voices coming from the living room. Ethan and Julia, no doubt. I waited for what felt like hours, my body tense with anticipation. Then, I made my move. I grabbed my phone and called both our parents, whispering a quick lie about a surprise for them at the house. "Mom, Dad, you need to come over right now. I have a surprise for Ethan and I want you to be part of it," I said, my voice trembling with feigned excitement. "Really, honey? At this hour?" "Okay, we'll be right there," my mom replied, confused but intrigued. I made the same call to Ethan's parents, ensuring that everyone would arrive at the same time. Then, I sat in the dark, waiting for the moment of truth. The sound of the doorbell broke the silence of the night. I heard footsteps and then voices of confusion and anger. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the living room. The scene before me was one of chaos. Ethan and Julia, caught in a compromising position, our parents standing in the doorway, shocked and appalled. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" Mr. Thompson roared, his face red with anger. Ethan was speechless, his eyes wide with shock. Julia was scrambling to cover herself, looking around frantically. I stepped into the room, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "Surprise," I said, my voice cold. The confrontation was intense. Accusations flew, tears were shed, and the truth came out in the ugliest way. Ethan tried to explain, but his words fell on deaf ears. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange sense of relief. The charade was over. I was free from the lies and deceit. I watched as Ethan's world crumbled around him. He had lost everything in one fell swoop, his family, his reputation, and any future he might have had with me. The aftermath of Ethan's betrayal left the house in a haunting silence. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cold coffee before me, my mind was a battleground of emotions. The dramatic revelation had left me reeling, but also ignited a flame of determination within. I spent the next few days in a flurry of activity. Meetings with my lawyer, going over the evidence Mike, the private detective, had gathered. The photos of Ethan with Julia, their intimate texts, and the damning correspondence where they planned to drug me with a powerful sleeping pill, it was all there. Ethan attempted to reach out several times, but I ignored his calls and messages. There was nothing left to say to him. On the day of the court hearing, I donned my sharpest suit, a symbol of the new, unyielding woman I had become. Walking into the courtroom, I saw Ethan, a shell of the confident man he once was. The hearing was intense. My lawyer presented the evidence with clinical precision. Ethan's lawyer tried to defend, but the proof was irrefutable. After the hearing, Ethan approached me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Jody, please, can we talk?" he implored. I faced him, the man who had shattered my trust. "What's left to say, Ethan?" My voice was calm but laced with disdain. I'm sorry, Jody. I never thought it would go this far," he stammered. "Sorry isn't good enough." "You made your choices, Ethan," I replied, turning my back on him. Over the following months, the legal battle raged on, but my resolve never wavered. The evidence was damning, and eventually, justice was served. Ethan was ordered to pay a significant sum for emotional damages. Leaving the courtroom for the last time, a wave of relief washed over me. I had stood up to Ethan and emerged victorious. That chapter of my life was closed. I was ready to move forward, stronger and more resilient. Ethan was now a part of my past, a difficult chapter, but one that had taught me the strength I possessed. Walking out of the courthouse, the final gavel still ringing in my ears, marked more than just a legal victory. It was the end of a chapter, a painful saga that had changed me in ways I never imagined. As I stepped into the sunlight, a sense of liberation enveloped me, the chains of my past finally broken. I didn't head home immediately. Instead, I found solace in a quaint park, a place that once held memories of Ethan and me. Now, it symbolized a fresh start. Sitting on an old bench, basking in the warmth of the sun, I pondered over the recent events. My phone vibrated with a message from my friend Lisa. "You're a rock star, Jody. Ready to celebrate your freedom?" I smiled, replying, "Absolutely. Just need a moment to myself first." "Take your time, girl. We'll party when you're up for it," she responded. As I sat there, lost in thought, I was approached by an elderly woman. "You're Jody, right?" I was in the courtroom. "What you did, standing up for yourself, was incredibly brave," she said softly. Her words touched a deep chord within me. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary," I replied, feeling a swell of pride. "You've inspired me, dear," she said before walking away, leaving me with a sense of purpose and strength. That evening, a small celebration with close friends marked the beginning of a new era. Laughter and cheers filled the air as we toasted to new beginnings. The next day brought an unexpected turn. While out for a walk, I received a call from Ethan. His voice was desperate, a stark contrast to the confident man I once knew. "Jody, please, I need your help," he pleaded. "What's wrong, Ethan?" I asked, although I had a guess. "My father, after everything that came out, he's considering kicking me out of the company and disinheriting me. You have to talk to him, convince him not to." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Karma had caught up with him. "Ethan, what you're asking? I can't do that. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences," I said calmly. "But Jody, I have nothing left. Please, I'm begging you," he implored. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of empowerment. "No, Ethan. It's time for you to face the music. Goodbye." I hung up, cutting off any further pleas. Walking back home, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Ethan's downfall was a result of his own actions, and I no longer bore any responsibility for his fate. In the following weeks, I threw myself into work and rekindled old hobbies. Friends and family surrounded me, their support unwavering. Life was moving forward, and so was I. One evening, as I relaxed with a book, a realization dawned on me: I was content. The turmoil of the past had given way to peace, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had also taught me resilience and self-worth. I had stood up for myself, sought justice, and emerged stronger.
I stood there, motionless, as Nathan tore the tickets to my art show right in front of my eyes. His words echoed in the small, cluttered living room of our modest home. "Nobody's going to buy your drawings, Emily. If you have time for this, get a real job." I felt a lump in my throat, the sting of tears in my eyes. But I swallowed hard, refusing to let them fall. I had dreamt of becoming an illustrator since I was a child, and after years of juggling motherhood and freelance work, I had finally managed to organize my own exhibition. Yet, here I was, watching my dream being literally ripped apart. Nathan's disdain for my work was not new. Ever since we moved in with his parents, my passion for art had become a point of contention. His parents, who never worked a day since their retirement, spent their days criticizing my cooking and scoffing at my illustrations. "You're not a painter. How can drawings make money?" they would sneer. No matter how often I explained that my art was not just a hobby, but a source of income, they refused to understand. I looked at the torn pieces of the ticket on the floor and felt a surge of determination. This was not just about my art. It was about my identity, my dreams, and my worth. I had always supported Nathan in his interests, never once belittling his weekend golf sessions with friends, even though they brought in no income. Why couldn't he extend the same courtesy to me? As Nathan turned away, dismissing the entire incident, I made a silent vow. I would no longer seek his approval. My work had value, and I would prove it to him and everyone else who doubted me. Picking up the torn pieces, I met Nathan's indifferent gaze with newfound resolve. "I am not just your wife or Sophie's mother," I said calmly, yet firmly. "I am an illustrator, and I will make my exhibition a success, with or without your support." Nathan scoffed, but I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. For the first time I had stood up to him. It was the beginning of a new chapter for me, one where I would no longer let his or anyone else's negativity dictate my life. That night, after putting Sophie to bed and ensuring the house was in order, I sat at my desk and began to sketch. The lines flowed from my pen, fueled by a mix of anger, hurt, and a burning desire to succeed. Each stroke was a step towards my independence, a declaration of my worth. This exhibition would be my moment, the turning point where I would finally emerge from the shadows of doubt and disrespect. As I worked into the early hours of the morning, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. I was more than just a part of this family. I was an individual with dreams and capabilities, and I was ready to fight for them. "Another day of scribbling away, Emily?" Nathan's mother, Mrs. Clark, sneered as I prepared breakfast. Her words, laced with sarcasm, were a daily ritual as ingrained in our routine as the morning coffee. "Yes, Mrs. Clark, just like any other day," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I had learned that responding with emotion only fueled their taunts. Nathan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the tension. His father, Mr. Clark, joined in. "Why bother with all this art nonsense? Real work brings in real money, not these childish drawings." I served breakfast, forcing a smile. "Art is my work, Mr. Clark, and it does pay," I said, more to myself than to them. Their laughter followed me as I retreated to my makeshift studio, a corner in our bedroom. Their words were like barbs, each one a reminder of how little they valued my passion. But I couldn't let them see how much it hurt. I had Sophie to think about, and my art. As I settled into my work, the door burst open. Nathan stood there, his face contorted with anger. "I got a call from Sophie's school. She's falling behind in her studies. What are you doing all day, Emily?" I looked up, surprised by his outburst. "I take care of Sophie, the house, and then I work." "You know my schedule, Nathan." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You call this work? This is why Sophie is struggling. You're too busy playing artist." His words stung. I had always balanced my responsibilities, ensuring Sophie's needs were met. "I make sure she does her homework, Nathan. I can't do it for her." "Maybe if you spent less time on these stupid drawings and more time being a mother." His words trailed off as he stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. I sat there, stunned. The accusations were unfair and hurtful. I wasn't just an artist. I was a full-time mother, a housekeeper, and a wife. Yet none of that seemed to matter to Nathan or his parents. That evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, her innocent voice broke through my turmoil. "Mommy, why does Daddy yell about your drawings? I like them. They're pretty." I kissed her forehead, a lump forming in my throat. Thank you, sweetie. Daddy just doesn't understand, but that's okay. What matters is that we understand each other, right? Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with a trust and love that warmed my heart. It was in that moment, looking at my daughter's innocent face, that I realized I had to make a change. I couldn't let Nathan's ignorance and his parents' disdain shape our lives any longer. I had to stand up for myself and for Sophie. The next morning, I made a decision. I would go through with the exhibition, no matter what they said. I would show them that my art was not just a hobby, but my lifeline, my expression, and my contribution to the world. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way out of this suffocating environment for Sophie and myself. The day I received the invitation for the solo exhibition was a ray of light in my otherwise dreary routine. I remember staring at the email on my laptop, my heart pounding with excitement and disbelief. This was it, my chance to shine, to prove my worth beyond the confines of these judgmental walls. However, my elation was short-lived. As I shared the news at dinner, hoping for a sliver of support, the reaction was anything but encouraging. A solo exhibition? Who would be interested in that? Nathan scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. His parents chimed in with their own barbs. Don't get your hopes up, dear. These things are often more about who you know than actual talent, Mrs. Clark said, her words sharp as knives. I clenched my jaw, fighting back the hurt. It's a big opportunity for me. People do appreciate my work, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Nathan laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Appreciate? Emily, let's be realistic. You're a stay-at-home mom who doodles. This isn't a career, it's a pastime at best. The dinner table became my battlefield, each word from Nathan a bullet I dodged or absorbed. I excused myself early, retreating to my studio corner with a heavy heart. Their words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't let them win. Not this time. I worked tirelessly for weeks, often staying up late to complete my pieces for the exhibition. Each brushstroke was a silent rebellion against Nathan's cruel words, a testament to my dedication and talent. One evening, as I put the finishing touches on a painting, Nathan barged into the room. Are you still up doing this? You're neglecting your duties, Emily. The house is a mess, and Sophie's been watching TV for hours. I stood up, my patience finally wearing thin. My art is important, Nathan. It's not just a duty I can neglect, and I've taken care of everything else. Can't you see I'm trying to build something for myself here? He snorted. Build what? A fantasy? You think these paintings will change our lives? Grow up, Emily. You're living in a dream world. I looked at him, the man I had married, now a stranger fueled by contempt. Maybe I am in a dream world, Nathan, but it's better than living in a world where I'm not respected or valued. I will go ahead with this exhibition, with or without your support. Turning my back to him, I continued my work, each brushstroke a declaration of my independence, a step away from his demeaning grasp. As the days passed, my resolve only strengthened. The exhibition was not just about showcasing my art. It was about reclaiming my self-worth and dignity. It was about showing Sophie that dreams are worth fighting for, no matter the opposition. And so, with a mix of fear and excitement, I prepared for the exhibition day, ready to step into the light, leaving the shadows of doubt and disrespect far behind. The day of the exhibition neared, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I knew it was more than just about displaying my art. It was a statement, a challenge against the disdainful environment I had been living in. One evening, as we sat in the dimly lit living room, I mustered the courage to invite Nathan. The exhibition is next week, I began hesitantly. I was wondering if you'd like to come. He didn't look up from the TV. Can't. Got plans with the guys. I felt a familiar sting, but persisted. It's important to me, Nathan. I've put a lot of effort into this. Finally, he turned, his eyes cold. Why do you keep going on about this, Emily? It's just a little show. It's not like it's going to change anything. I held the invitation out to him, a futile gesture of hope. It's not just a little show to me. It's my work, my passion. With a swift, careless motion, Nathan grabbed the invitation and tore it in half. This is what I think of your little hobby, he sneered. The pieces fluttered to the ground, a symbol of my shattered efforts. I stood there, frozen, as he turned back to his show, dismissing my dreams as if they were nothing. Tears blurred my vision as I picked up the remnants of the invitation. His words echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of the lack of respect I had been enduring. But amidst the hurt and humiliation, a fierce determination took root within me. I was done seeking validation from a man who couldn't see beyond his own ego. I glanced at Sophie, who had witnessed the whole scene from the doorway. Her eyes were wide, filled with confusion and sadness. At that moment, I knew I had to set an example for her. I couldn't let her grow up thinking it was acceptable for her dreams to be trampled upon like this. The next morning, I made a decision. I would leave Nathan, not immediately, but soon. I would plan it carefully, for Sophie's sake and mine. This exhibition would be my stepping stone, a way to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. The days leading up to the exhibition were a blur of preparation and quiet planning. I was a woman on a mission, no longer the timid, acquiescent wife and daughter-in-law. I reached out to friends, seeking support and advice. I opened a separate bank account, a small but significant step towards financial independence. On the day of the exhibition, as I stood among my paintings, surrounded by appreciative onlookers, I felt a sense of accomplishment like never before. My art was being seen, appreciated. It was a validation that Nathan and his parents could never understand. As people inquired about my work, expressing interest and admiration, I felt my confidence soar. Each compliment, each interested glance at my paintings, was a vindication of my talent and hard work. I sold my first piece that day, a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I was no longer just Nathan's wife or Mrs. Clark's daughter-in-law, but Emily, the artist, a woman who had the courage to stand up for herself and her dreams. The success of the exhibition was the turning point. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had been living. The disdain and disrespect were suffocating, and for the first time I saw a way out. I waited until Nathan left for work and Sophie was at school. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I packed a small suitcase with essentials. I took a deep breath as I looked around the room, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I left a note on the kitchen table, not wanting to confront Nathan or his parents directly. I knew they wouldn't understand, nor did I expect them to. The note was brief. I need some time and space. Sophie and I will be staying with my parents for a while. I picked Sophie up from school that day, her smile a balm to my anxious heart. We're going on a little trip to Grandma and Grandpa's, I told her. She was excited, unaware of the weight of our journey. At my parents' house, I finally felt a sense of peace. They welcomed us with open arms, no questions asked. They saw the tiredness in my eyes and the determination in my posture. You always have a home here, Emily, my mother said, hugging me tightly. In the safety of my childhood home, I explained to Sophie why we were there. Mommy needs some time to work on her paintings, and we need a little break from Daddy, I said gently. Sophie, wise beyond her years, looked up at me with her big eyes. Is it because Daddy doesn't like your drawings? Her question stung, but I nodded. Sometimes people don't understand the things we love, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean we should stop loving them. The days turned into weeks. I spent my time working on new illustrations and planning our future. The quiet and support of my parents' home were a stark contrast to the constant criticism I had faced in Nathan's house. One afternoon, I received a call from Nathan. His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. Where are you? Why aren't you home? You can't just take Sophie and leave. His words were like daggers, but I stood my ground. Sophie and I are safe. We're with my parents. I needed space, Nathan. Space you never gave me. You're being selfish, Emily. You're tearing this family apart over some paintings. I clenched the phone tightly, my resolve hardening. No, Nathan. You tore this family apart with your disrespect and disdain for what I love. I won't apologize for wanting to be happy, for wanting Sophie to see her mother happy. There was silence on the other end, and then a click. He had hung up. But it didn't matter. I had spoken my truth, something I had been afraid to do for so long. In those weeks at my parents' house, I began to see a future for Sophie and myself, a future where we were free to be who we wanted to be, free from judgment and belittlement. It was a future I was determined to make a reality. The weeks following my departure were a whirlwind. I immersed myself in my work, finding solace in the strokes of my brush. My parents, encouragement was a stark contrast to the environment I had left behind. They believed in me, and that belief was a powerful motivator. My phone buzzed one evening with a call from Nathan. Bracing myself, I answered. His voice was different this time, laced with desperation. "Emily, please come back. The house is a mess, and I can't handle everything on my own." His plea was a strange mix of pitiful and infuriating. "You're calling me back to clean up your mess?" I asked, my voice steady. "It's not just that. Sophie misses her home, doesn't she?" "You're being selfish, keeping her away," he replied, trying to guilt-trip me. I sighed, feeling a surge of pity for the man I once loved. "Sophie is doing fine. She's happy and well cared for. This isn't about her, Nathan. This is about you, not being able to handle the responsibilities you so easily dismissed when I was there." Nathan was silent for a moment. I need you, Emily." "I needed you too. Nathan, I needed your support and respect, but you chose to belittle my dreams and ambitions. I can't come back to that," I said, my voice firm. The call ended with Nathan's empty pleas echoing in my ears. It was clear he had not changed. His request was not for reconciliation, but for convenience. Meanwhile, my art started gaining traction. I received more commissions and even had inquiries from galleries interested in showcasing my work. It was exhilarating and validating. My hard work was paying off, not just in terms of recognition, but also financially. One day, as I was working on a new piece, Sophie came to me with a drawing. "Look, Mommy, I made this for you." Her drawing, a colorful depiction of us holding hands, was a stark reminder of why I had made the decision to leave. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you," I told her, hugging her tightly. My success was a bittersweet reminder of the life I had left behind. Nathan's calls became more infrequent, each one more desperate than the last. He was struggling to manage without me, and while part of me felt vindicated, another part felt sorry for him. But I had made my choice, for Sophie and for myself. I was building a new life, one where my art was not just a hobby, but my identity. A life where I was respected and valued. As the invitations to exhibitions and galleries came in, I realized that this was just the beginning. I had stepped out of Nathan's shadow and into my own light. As my reputation as an artist grew, so did the attention I received. It wasn't long before a local newspaper expressed interest in my story. The idea of sharing my journey was both exhilarating and intimidating, but I knew it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. The day of the interview, I sat in my parents' cozy living room, the reporter's recorder blinking on the coffee table. "Tell us, Emily, what inspired you to pursue art so passionately?" he asked, his pen poised over his notepad. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. Art has always been a part of who I am, but the real push came from needing to prove to myself, and perhaps to others, that my passion was more than just a hobby. It was my voice, my identity. The reporter nodded, scribbling down notes. "And how has your family reacted to your success?" The question was a loaded one. I chose my words carefully. "Let's just say not everyone understood my journey. But I believe in following your dreams, even if it means walking that path alone." The article came out a few days later. "Local artist finds success against all odds," the headline read. It painted me as a sort of underdog hero, a narrative I hadn't expected but appreciated. The response was overwhelming, with people reaching out to express their support and admiration. Among the flurry of positive attention, Nathan's reaction was conspicuously absent. That is, until one day he showed up at my parents' doorstep, unannounced and uninvited. I opened the door to find him standing there, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes. "You're making a spectacle of our family with these stories," he accused, waving a copy of the newspaper in his hand. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "I shared my story, Nathan. A story of finding my own path. I didn't mention you or anyone else." He scoffed. "But it's obvious, isn't it? You're making me out to be the bad guy." "Am I? Or did you do that all by yourself?" I countered, my patience wearing thin. Nathan's face reddened. "I want you and Sophie back. You belong with me, with your family." I shook my head, a sense of finality settling over me. "No, Nathan, Sophie and I are doing just fine. We're happy and we're free from the negativity and disrespect we faced with you." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I held up my hand. "This is my life now, Nathan. I suggest you find a way to move on with yours." As he stormed off, I felt a sense of closure. I had stood up to him, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth. In the weeks that followed, my art continued to flourish. Exhibitions, commissions, and collaborations, my calendar was full. Sophie thrived too, her laughter and creativity a constant source of joy. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. A future I had carved out for myself and my daughter on our terms.